I'm gonna play my other game tonight. It's a little bit further back in the storyline. Oh, I need my gamepad. Buried in there a bunch of stuff. Alright. I was working on trying to get a bench over to a new area I'm trying to get into. Let's see what should have some new stuff to build if I learned it yet. Let's see if there's any new recipes. These are just given upgrades, I think. Let's see if I can build one.
I perceive a distinct lack of snacks. Getting thirsty.
This sector will be powered down momentarily. If you have not already evacuated the facility, consider this your top priority. Have a wonderful and productive evening. Facility access detected. Caution advised.
I'm feeling distinctly anhydrous.
Attention. This This sector is under precautionary security measures. Please remain in place and wait for security assistance.
I'm ravenous.
Air Quality Bulletin. Radiation levels exceeding operational safety limits. Venting procedure commencing.
you very much. And deposit. Okay, I'm going to make this bench. I gotta create this, get all the components together. This is a new enhancement to the game. Enhancement bench. Allows you to upgrade your weapons. Played on this game last night on my other save, which is a lot further in the game. Oh, auto 10. Cool. Let's see. Need some more screws. I don't know what the point of this thing is. Oh, need a little bit more. Fancy, fancy. Where did it hold before? Like 8? Uh-huh. sorry about that. Alright. Yeah, it looks like it only increased it by 2. Damage is 30. $26. A little bit better. Not terribly better. It's a prettier gun, I guess. I think you can upgrade it. No, you can't upgrade it. Well, it says if this item can eventually be upgraded. But I don't have the recipes for it yet. Let's go see if we can get to the resident sector. Campus. Here, I think. Remember that guy being there. Need more metal. Running out of metal. Didn't need to bring that back. Where's the workbench? Had a workbench in there. Will this open now? Nope. was down. Let's see. Weapons. The weapons over here. Deposit those there. Had this up there. The knife was down here. And I don't know where the workbench went. My carts are here. I could have sworn I made a workbench. Where'd it go? Hello. Didn't see you there. Playing a game here tonight. They dropped a new version of it, so now I'm sort of playing it, I guess. I do have a movie here to watch. American Moon. Up here in the corner. Start that. I made a workbench, but I can't find what I did with it. And I don't see it left up here somewhere. It's a glitch. I don't know. I'll have to make another one, I guess.
In 1902, French filmmaker Georges Méliès created a visionary film which seemed to anticipate in many ways the Apollo missions to the moon of the 1960s. Méliès' film, of course, was just a fantasy. And the Apollo missions? Were they real, or were they just a modern and more sophisticated version of the same fantasy? The story of the Apollo missions began in 1961, when President Kennedy announced before the world that the United States intended to land a man on the moon before the end of the decade or before 1970. This caused quite a stir, as up to that point the United States had only been able to launch an astronaut, Alan Shepard, in a short suborbital flight of only 15 minutes. Never having even sent a man in Earth orbit, setting the goal of reaching the moon in less than 9 years sounded like a far-fetched idea, to say the least. But it is at that point, according to the official narrative, that the United States set in motion a powerful technological machine that would actually allow them to reach the goal established by Kennedy a few months before the end of the decade, in July 1969. Those who don't believe that we went to the moon instead maintain that the United States did launch into this titanic enterprise, but they reached a point around 1967 in which they realized they could not overcome all the obstacles posed by such an ambitious project. And at that point, the only option left was to pretend to go to the moon. As they could not admit to the entire world that they were unable to achieve their goal, the United States would have chosen to fake the missions by using all the simulation systems they already had in place, which allowed them to replicate an entire lunar mission from beginning to end. For the people watching at home, it would have made no difference. Let's see now more in detail what happened during the historic decade of the lunar missions. History books tell us that in the 1960s, the so-called race to the moon took place. It refers to the competition between the United States and the Soviet Union about who could reach the moon first. If we take a closer look at the events, however, we will realize that it was actually a one-sided race, without a real opponent. It was only the Americans who truly tried to the end, driven not so much by the competition with the Soviets, but rather by the monstrous propaganda machine they themselves had set in motion at the beginning of the decade. Officially, the so-called race to the moon began on April 12, 1961, when the Soviets managed to put into orbit the first human being, Yuri Gagarin. It was then that President Kennedy asked Vice President Johnson to assess what the actual possibilities were for the United States to beat the Russians into space. This is where a very important figure comes into the picture, NASA Administrator James E. Webb. Johnson consulted with Webb and a few days later returned to Kennedy with an answer. Among the contemplated possibilities, one was to send a man to the moon. 2 weeks later, President Kennedy delivered the following speech in front of Congress.
Now it is time to take longer strides. Time for a great new American enterprise. Time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement. I therefore ask the Congress, above and beyond the increases I have earlier requested for space activities, to provide the funds which are needed to meet the following national goals. First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
From that moment on, NASA Administrator James Webb threw all his energies behind the Lunar project. From NASA's historical archives, we read, Webb, who had endorsed the Apollo program to Kennedy, now had his priorities fixed on the manned lunar landing, and he reorganized the space agency accordingly. An excellent mediator, Webb managed to gather the support from prominent political figures such as Senator Kerr from Oklahoma. From the NASA archives, we read, Kerr told his congressional colleagues that Webb was enthusiastic about the program, and that if Jim Webb says we can land a man on the moon and bring him safely home, then it can be done. This endorsement, concludes the document, secured considerable political support for the Lunar project. Behind the scenes, however, Kennedy remained skeptical about such a monumental task. On September 18, 1963, Kennedy summoned Webb at the White House to express his doubts about the Lunar project. Thanks to a recently released recording, we can listen to the actual conversation between the two men.
If I get re-elected, we're not going to go to the moon in our period, are we? No, we're not going. You apply that, huh? You think the moon and the man landing on the moon is a good idea? Yes, I think because when you do the same with instruments much cheaper, so you can't do the same. The lunar landing gave us the impetus to build big boosters and to tailor them specifically for the purpose Therefore, they're going to succeed. Otherwise, they would not have succeeded or been efficient. But this looks like a hell of a lot of dough to go to the moon when you can go and learn most of what you want scientifically through instruments. Putting a man on the moon really is a stunt, and it isn't worth that many billions.
Only 2 days later, in front of the United Nations, Kennedy made one last attempt to engage the Soviets in going to the moon together.
Finally, in a field where the United States and the Soviet Union have a special capacity in the field of space, there is room for new cooperation, for further joint efforts in the regulation and exploration of space. I include among these possibilities a joint expedition to the moon.
Khrushchev's response was not long in coming, but it was certainly not encouraging. 1 month later, at a meeting with the foreign press, the chief of the Kremlin stated, "At the present time, we do not plan flights of cosmonauts to the moon. I have read a report that the Americans wish to land on the moon by 1970. Well, let's wish them success, and we will see how they fly there, and how they will land there, or to be more correct, moon there. And most important, how they will get up and come back. We do not wish to compete in sending people to the moon without thorough preparation."
They took off their hats.
At that point, Kennedy realized that the die was cast, and that the United States would have to go it alone.
This nation has tossed its cap over the wall of space. We have no choice but to follow it.
The day after, in Dallas, John Kennedy was killed. But at that point, the lunar program had been launched and passed directly into the hands of the new president, Lyndon Johnson. In the meantime, the Soviets were still trying to develop a lunar program and were secretly training their cosmonauts for it. But their program ended abruptly for a number of different reasons. The first was the unexpected death of Sergei Korolyov, the father of the Russian space program.
During routine surgery in January 1966, Korolyov died. The one figure with the authority and vision to galvanize the system behind the goal of beating the Americans had gone.
The man who had launched the first satellite, Sputnik, who had put the first man in orbit, Gagarin, the man who had conceived the entire Soviet space program, was gone without leaving a successor, and there was no one capable of replacing him at that point. This led to a series of internal divisions at the top of the Russian Space Agency, which resulted in a streak of dramatic disasters. 4 heavy rockets of the new N-1 kind, designed to reach the moon, exploded during testing on the ground. It was the end of the Soviet lunar program, as described by Roald Sagdayev, the former director of the Russian Space Agency.
Very few people remember that in parallel with American Apollo program, Soviets attempted to have their own program. But this Soviet program on kind of counterpart to American Apollo, it failed. It failed because the large rocket, Russian counterpart to Saturn V, exploded several times, even without getting chance to take off the launching site.
In the meantime, the situation in the United States was rapidly changing.
This evening, I came here to speak to you about Vietnam. I do not have to tell you that our people are profoundly concerned about that struggle.
The Vietnam War now completely occupied the minds of the Americans, while ingurgitating an ever-increasing share of the national budget. At the same time, the cost of the Apollo program was spiraling out of control. As this documentary of the time explains, the costs of the lunar project had soared beyond all expectations, even before a single rocket had lifted off the ground.
The status of fabrication and testing of Apollo hardware was such that the program had reached and passed its peak costs. Before a single manned Apollo mission was launched, the program itself began to go out of business.
In fall of 1965, General Samuel C. Phillips, director of the Lunar Landing Program, presented NASA executives with a report that exposed in no mild terms the state of confusion and shortcomings suffered by the Apollo program. In particular, Phillips pointed his finger on the command module and the second stage of the Saturn rocket, which had been contracted to the aerospace company North American. After 4.5 years, and a little more than a year before first flight,